Do we have any movie people in here? Like three? Yeah. I self-identify as a movie person. I have always loved movies. I struggle with TV shows. However, a movie I can sit down and watch all day. Um, I will say the older I get, the harder it is for me to justify spending an absurd amount of time in front of a TV. Unless it's Lord of the Rings, I will watch all three extended editions at once. But I do try to still have that aspect about my life. I spent this last month really. I spent more at the movie theater than I have in quite a while. There were two big movies that came out. Um, it was I'm sure you know what they are, the Odyssey and Spider-Man: Brand New Day. Um, I really enjoyed both of them, and I really feel like, in the sense of belonging, we've been talking for a few weeks about this idea of belonging, knowing where you're supposed to be. That's exactly what those two movies are about. They almost have the exact same premise. So I'm actually going to start off by reading a verse here for you, and then we'll get into a little bit more about that. This is Romans 15, verses 5 through 7. It says, "May the God who gives endurance and encouragement give you the same attitude of mind toward each other that Christ Jesus had, so that with one mind and one voice you may glorify the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you, for the glory of God." When we speak about belonging, it's really easy to come into this idea of, especially in the Odyssey, it's a story about somebody trying to get home where they belong, right? Any Odyssey fans in here? Okay, more than movie fans. Now, are we talking book or are we talking any of the film adaptations? Both. Okay. I also like the book a lot. Matter of fact, I spent about 30 minutes at the pool recently discussing the differences between the book and the movie with Brienne Youngblood, which makes sense for her because she's an English teacher. I'm just a little bit nerdy. I have a lot of thoughts on it, and if you really want to know, I will sit down and talk with you about it. But I actually really like this new adaptation too. A little bit different than the book for sure, but it's a great movie. And if you haven't seen either one of these movies, I'm not going to give away any spoilers, although hopefully you already know what happens in the Odyssey. It's been around for a while. I mean, think about some of the biggest stories we tell, whether it is about the Odyssey or Spider-Man. The Odyssey is someone searching for home. The new Spider-Man is people trying to understand who they are. Almost every story, every great story, comes back to the same question. And that question is, where do I belong? And I don't think that that's just a movie question. I think that that is a human being question. I think every one of us in this room, if not now, at some point have spent a good deal of time trying to get the answer to that question. Each one of us have asked ourselves similar questions. Whether it's a kid in student ministry, do I belong at school, at my school, or an adult? Do I belong at my job? Do I belong with these friends? Do I belong here? Right. The cool thing about being ingrained in a church and knowing about Jesus is Jesus' entire ministry was been around answering that question. The gospel is very clear on what the answer to that question is, whether it is, do I belong here? Do I belong with these people? Jesus answers that question with an invitation. He says, come home, you belong with me, right? We spend a lot of time asking ourselves, where are we supposed to be, right? Jesus says, come home, You belong with me. The heart of the Odyssey is a person on a journey searching for home, right? Odysseus spends years traveling. He faces obstacles, monsters, temptations, uncertainty. But the thing that keeps driving him forward is his desire to return to the place that he belongs. One of the reasons that stories like the Odyssey last so long and keep so much momentum going forward is because all of us understand that feeling behind it. Whether you like the book or the movie or any of it, you can still resonate with that part of the movie. Like, yeah, I need to know where I'm supposed to be. I think deep down, we're all searching for home. And I don't mean a building, I don't mean a location. I think we are searching for a place where we feel like we are known, where we are loved, and where we are wanted. Because everyone wants to belong. One of the deepest desires every person has is that desire to belong, and it looks different for each of us, and it comes in different thoughts. I asked the questions earlier: do I belong here? Do I belong with these friends? Sometimes it's, do they like me? Do I fit in? Would anyone notice if I was not here? Is there a place for me? Those questions don't go away as we get older. It doesn't stop as we age out of student ministry. We walk into a restaurant, where do I sit? We walk into a new classroom or a new study room in college. Who's going to talk to me? We walk into a new group of people or try to find a new group of people. Does anyone actually want me here? And if we're honest, I think, and not just kids, or not just teenagers, but I think adults as well, we don't stop asking those questions. We just get better at hiding them. Over the years, Lexi said it herself, I've been a part of this student ministry for 7 years, just like her. And just like her, this is my last month in this student ministry. I'm transitioning into a new role here. But over the years doing student ministry here, there have been a ton of lessons that I have learned in this. And I'll be bold enough to say this. I think the students here have taught me more about belonging than I ever expected. I thought that I was here to impact them, and I was, but I think what I've learned the most is that God often uses people that we're pouring into to impact us. The people that we think that we are supposed to give our all to, they're giving just as much to us. Our students have reminded me that belonging is not created through bigger events or better programs or new trends. Belonging happens when people experience the heart of Jesus around them. Romans 15, Paul says, welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you. Notice something important there. He doesn't say, welcome one another because we have it all together. He doesn't say, welcome one another because we all believe the same things. Welcome one another because they deserve it, right? He says, welcome one another because Christ welcomed you. The foundation of belonging isn't what we do for people. The foundation of belonging is what Jesus has already done for us. Belonging isn't a strategy, it's a reflection of the heart of Jesus. I want to walk you through some of the lessons that I've learned from my so-called Odyssey in student ministry. So that's actually from the movie, if you were wondering. Yeah. So my Odyssey through student ministry. Lesson 1 is belonging comes before believing. This is one of the first things I learned as a student minister. It's one of the coolest lessons that these students have taught me. People often need to know that they belong before they're ready to believe. I'm going to read some verses for you. This is the story of Zacchaeus, Luke 19, 1 through 10. It says, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. When we look at the story of Zacchaeus, there's a few things we need to know. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. People hated him. I think that's still a common trend. He was viewed as a traitor. He was wealthy, but he was lonely. The story tells us that he climbed a tree. Why? Yes, to see Jesus and because he was short. Because he wanted to see Jesus. And Jesus walks by, he looks up, and he says, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. Jesus didn't begin with a lecture. He didn't begin with correction. He began with relationship. He saw Zacchaeus. He called Zacchaeus by his name. He invited himself into his life. And Jesus gave Zacchaeus a place at the table before his life was cleaned up. If you have never really read this story completely, that is the heart of the gospel, inviting people to the table before anything else, wanting to know their name, wanting to spend time with them. We always ask this question to ourselves, is there room for me? And the gospel of Jesus answers that question with a very emphatic yes. Yes, there's absolutely room for every one of us at that table. There's room for the broken. There's room for the doubting. There's room for the person who doesn't have everything figured out. There's room for a person who feels like an outsider. Jesus doesn't wait for us to become worthy of belonging. He welcomes us, and then the transformation starts to happen. Students taught me this. They don't need a church that expects them to arrive perfect. They need a church that reminds them that they have a place while God is still working on them. The second lesson I learned is this. It's belonging is contagious. Hebrews 10, 24 through 25 says, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Students are really good at picking up culture. They know when adults are genuine. They know when somebody actually cares. They know when somebody is just doing their job. And students have a tendency to mirror what the leaders model. If we go into this group not really caring about the people, but caring about what people think of us, that's what the students engage in. If we go in learning people's names and making sure that they are welcome at the table, that's what the students engage in. If we create a culture of criticism, students learn criticism. If leaders create a culture of comparison, students learn comparison. But if leaders create a culture of love, encouragement, and inclusion, the students begin doing the same thing. I'll say it again. Hebrews says, consider how we may spur one another on. That means that we should intentionally think about how we can build others up. Belonging doesn't happen accidentally. Someone has to notice. Someone has to include. Someone has to move toward the person standing alone. What I learned on this Odyssey was that I needed to be a noticer. I needed to be an includer. I needed to be someone who got excited when somebody walked through my door. Because when students experience belonging, they begin giving belonging away. That's what makes it contagious. In 1 Thessalonians 5:11, it says, "Therefore encourage one another and build each other up." I want you to notice that this isn't describing a program, it describes a culture. And as I already said, students are really good at picking up culture. Encouragement isn't something that we schedule. It's not something that we become. And this is an important reminder. We need to treat people like people and not projects. Jesus never looked at people as ministry assignments. He loved people because they were created in the image of God. Not because they could increase attendance, not because they could make the ministry look successful, but because they mattered. Another lesson I learned in my Odyssey is that belonging is found in laughter. Proverbs 17:22 says, "A cheerful heart is good medicine." One of the things students taught me is that some of our deepest relationships can be formed just because we laugh together. I want you to think about some of your closest friendships or your closest relationships. Some of your favorite memories probably are not from a serious conversation. They're probably from something that was silly, a ridiculous inside joke, a funny moment at camp, a conversation that didn't make sense, but anyone that was around it laughed anyway. Those moments matter. Laughter opens the door to connection. I think sometimes we can kind of critique how much joy we're putting into our ministry. Overall, not Clearview. I feel like we do a pretty good job of enjoying each other's presence, but just overall, and I think it's really important that we hear that joy isn't a distraction from ministry. It's part of God's design for relationships. Ecclesiastes 3:4 says there's a time to laugh and a time to dance. God created us for a lot of reasons. I can assure you that joy was one of them. Jesus wasn't distant from celebration. He attended weddings. He shared meals. He spent time with people. He wasn't just present for people's problems. He was present for their lives. He wanted to know what was going on. He wanted to share in the good with them. John 15:11 says, "I have told you of these things so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." Jesus didn't simply want his followers to obey him. He wanted them to experience joy, to experience life with him, to abide in him, and to love one another and experience his joy together. Belonging, love, and joy are connected. Sometimes laughter is the first step towards deeper conversations. Sometimes joy creates an environment where people finally feel safe enough to open their hearts. The next lesson I learned is belonging isn't found in appearance. I think y'all all know this already, but smoke machines and LED screens and things like that, that's just not us as a church, right? But we do live in a world that is obsessed with appearances, how something looks from the outside before we even try to get connected inside, right? So big screens, perfect graphics, the newest trends, the coolest events, heavy social media presence. All of those things, yes, they can be useful, but they don't create belonging. They might get people in the room, but they don't make people stay. Trends change, but I think it's important that we know that care does not. Trends change, but care doesn't. Students don't remember every game, every presentation, or really good Bible study that I created. They don't always remember those, right? But they remember the leader who remembers their names. They remember the leaders who say, hey, I'm glad you were here, as soon as they walked in the door, right? They don't remember every sermon, but they remember the person who asked, how are you really doing? I learned that it is important that I don't try to understand everything about teenagers. That's really tough. It's not important for me to understand every meme, but it is important for me to remember names. I learned that it's important for us to make an environment or set an environment where people can say, I've been struggling, I don't understand, I'm not sure that I believe that. Belonging grows when honesty is welcomed instead of punished. I'm a firm believer in that, knowing that I can go to someone and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, and they're not going to push me out, right? But they're really gonna take that moment to connect with me, try to understand what I'm thinking, and help me understand if I need something like that. Which goes right into the next deal. Grace is connected to belonging, or belonging is connected to grace. Ephesians 2:19 says, consequently, you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and also members of his household. I want you to look at that transition from strangers to family, from outsiders to belonging. That's the gospel. And that's the way that leaders respond to people. And the way the leaders respond to people teaches them whether church is a courtroom or a family. Are we asking them to become a part of our family? Or are we asking them questions so that we can judge them and condemn them and push them away? Is church a place where people are afraid to mess up or to show up messed up? Or is it a place where people know that they are loved while God is changing them? Because Jesus was full of grace and truth, and we need both of those. Correction does matter, but so does truth. Correction is most effective when someone knows that they are still loved, right? The truth of the gospel that we go back to is that we're asking people into our family, to become our family. That's the truth they need to know, regardless of how you interact in this moment, regardless of if you take this correction well. I want to continue my relationship with you. I want to stay close to you, and I want to love you like Jesus did. Grace leaves fingerprints, and I think that people may forget what we say in the moment sometimes, but they remember how we make them feel when they're struggling. Hey, I'm not sure I believe that. Hey, I don't understand. Hey, I see that differently than you do. Okay. This is what I think this is what the Bible is telling me, but I still love you, and I don't want to push you out of my life because we disagree. I don't want to force you into this point of view. Let's take time and discuss it. Which goes into the next one. Belonging is inclusion. 1 Corinthians 12, verses 4 through 6. There are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. There are different kinds of working, but in all of them and in every one, it is the same God at work. Paul tells the church, there are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them. I think it's important for us to know that the church was never meant to be filled with identical people. God didn't create a kingdom of copies. We are all made in the image of God, but we also all have our own unique fingerprint, and that's physically and metaphorically. He he created a family of individuals, different personalities, different gifts, different stories, different backgrounds. And that's what makes the gospel beautiful. The goal isn't uniformity, the goal is unity. All of us coming together. Diversity isn't this obstacle to belonging, it's evidence of God's creativity in our creation. A healthy ministry isn't one where everyone looks the same. It's one where everyone knows that they have a place. Regardless of who they are, they have a place at the table. We'll move into the last point. Belonging can only be partially manufactured. I know that is a confusing sentence. I think we've spent a lot of time in this series telling people, hey, it's important to take all these steps to make sure people belong. And yes, that is a thing we need to do. But there's more to it. John 15, verses 4 through 5 say, remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine. You are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. I think it's important to notice how much God is doing in these moments. Yes, we can set an environment up. However, it doesn't work if we're not allowing God to be a part of it and not spending time to have that cultivation process. It doesn't say in these verses that fruit is stapled to the tree, right? It says fruit is cultivated over time. In the same way, belonging isn't just manufactured, it's cultivated. We can plant the tree, but then we have to nurture it. We have to take care of it. You can't schedule deep relationships. You can schedule events. You can schedule times on Wednesday nights for them to hang together, but you can't schedule the connection. The connection is made because we're nurturing that part of our ministry. We can't create a community with one event. Notice that Lexi, when she was talking earlier, said over time, this group became important to me. Community isn't made immediately. Programs gather people, but relationships are what cultivate the belonging. Relationships with God that flow into others. Healthy things grow naturally because they remain connected. Fruit takes time, relationships take time, belonging takes time. Our job isn't to manufacture community. Our job is to create environments where God can grow it. I spent some time this week cleaning our guest room because we had somebody coming to stay with us. And as I was cleaning, I found that we have our game table is in there, like our where we keep all of our board games and stuff. And one of our puzzles had fallen off the shelf, and somehow one singular piece came out. And I don't know why, but I kind of have had it in my pocket all week, and I've just, kept it as a reminder. I've been thinking about how by itself, this one piece doesn't tell the whole story, right? It doesn't look very important, but when it's connected to the rest of the puzzle, suddenly there's meaning, right? Suddenly it has a purpose. It has a place. And I think a lot of students, and honestly a lot of us adults, I think it's so easy for us to feel like a small puzzle piece where we wonder, do I matter? And where do I fit? Would anyone notice if I wasn't here? But the answer of the gospel is this: we were never created to exist alone. I think it's important that we know that God, He created us for community. He designed us for family. And if you're wondering, the church is not a complete. It's not complete without you. It's not complete without every piece. And I honestly am really glad that I picked this up, because at some point, hopefully I don't forget, I will put it back in the box and we can keep that puzzle. It would be really annoying if we went to work on this puzzle and got all the way there without it. And that's the same point that I want to make for you. It would be really unfortunate for us if at the end of everything, or just on a normal Sunday, we look out and you're not here with us. We love all of our puzzle pieces, and we want to make sure that you know that you belong here. You're a part of us. We're not complete without you. I said this earlier. I thought that I was in this role to impact our students, but then what I found was, along the way, they were all impacting me, and they just continuously reminded me all these things. Belonging isn't built through the bigger events; it's built through smaller moments. Names remembered, conversations held, invitations extended, burden shared. One act of faithful presence at a time. And when we learn to create belonging for others, we begin reflecting the heart of Jesus more clearly, because Jesus is the ultimate example of belonging. He welcomed us before we had it figured out. He loved us before we were worthy. He made room for us before we knew we needed a place. So now we do the same, because we don't create belonging. We extend the belonging that we've already received from Jesus. And if you heard nothing else, hear this. The Odyssey, everyone is searching for home. Spider-Man, everyone is searching for identity and for acceptance. But Romans 15, it says that Jesus gives us both of those things. The world tells us to find belonging by proving who we are. Jesus tells us to find belonging by discovering whose we are. Please hear that if you hear nothing else. Jesus says we already have belonging. We have a home. We can know who we are and have our place. I'm going to pray, and then we'll move on. God, thank you so much for just a place to feel connected overall. I thank you so much for just this overwhelming sense of knowing that I am where I'm supposed to be. I'm praying today that we're inviting others to feel the same way here, God. Inviting others to know that they are welcomed and they are included. There's room for them at the table. And all they have to do is focus on that, God. I thank you just for allowing me to be a puzzle piece and to know that I fit in somewhere. In your name I pray. Amen.